Special Operations Training Detachment, SOT D West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center.
Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Major Phil Ficken about fighting products. Last time we covered what fighting products are and which ones are the most essential for planning and executing operations. In this episode, we will discuss the use of digital and analog products, give examples of when to use one versus the other, and weigh the pros and cons of both. How does a company actually display all these fighting products?
Yeah, so this is a discussion that we very often have with our rotational units because there are a lot of different ways to do it. And really, I'm going to break it first into two major categories, digital and analog products. Because, with the advent of and proliferation of computers and digital devices, digital fighting products have become a very integral part of the way that we do business in the military. But I think it also doesn't change that analog products, a simple physical map with icons drawn on it, and, pieces of paper with handwriting, that never goes out of style. And there's some benefits to each that I'll talk a little bit about. And I'll start off on the digital side. So here in SOF, right now, we, on the digital side, typically will use a MCS COP, Palantir, or some other common operating picture type of software on the computer that requires some sort of internet connection at the appropriate level of classification and large enough bandwidth to stream information back and forth. So we talk MCS COP is our program of record right now. And you might access this on a supercomputer, and it's going to use like a cloud server to store the information. So if you can log on, now you can access all the information, essentially from that we talked about, all the fighting product information we talked about. You can probably access it in a certain form on a program like that. So what I'll say though is that a detachment probably won't be able to access this effectively from a patrol base in a denied area while minimizing their electromagnetic signature. Yeah, which is what we see out here at NTC. So a robust set of digital products on a COP management system like MCS COP becomes more feasible as you go up in echelon, and particularly once you hit the SOTF level and above. I think it's expected. But even at the AOB level, if you see an AOB in the friendly rear area and they have access to that correct level of internet connectivity and the appropriate level of classification system, it becomes more feasible for them to use that, or for them to use that more frequently. So the real advantage of any kind of digital fighting products, not only MCS COP or something like that, is going to be that it's easy to share over a variety of communication systems. Since it's digital, with MCS COP, you can just log on and you got access to everything. And really it's limited only by the size of the transmissions and the connectivity required to access it. So that's the benefit of it. But I'm going to transition from there to say, and let this be my tagline, analog is for everyone. Okay. Because there are a few reasons that everyone should have an analog version at a minimum of all of their fighting products. So first off, analog products allow for immediate common access to the information outside of a computer screen or a cell phone or whatever type of device you might be accessing a digital product. So one of the things we see as we coach is that if you have digital products and you don't have big screens for people to see them on, only one person's looking at them at a time. And that's a problem because the most effective staff environment is a collaborative staff environment. Absolutely. Everyone needs to be able to see it. In getting around a physical map and talking about things, you got icons on the map, the information is displayed around the map. Like that is a effective way to use your analog products to build common understanding within the staff and allow for effective work of the team together. And so that's really my first major benefit to using analog products. The second one is that in tactical situations where an element needs to reduce their electromagnetic signature. Analog products will allow you to do this because you don't have to connect to any type of internet or send any type of signal to work off of an analog product.
Don't even need electricity.
You need nothing. Yeah, you need, you can get by with a wax pen and some paper maps, and you can make, and a few sheets of paper, you can make something happen. So that's number two. And really the third reason that I'll mention is that, in the modern battlefield environment where electromagnetic attack, jamming, all sorts of things like that come into play very frequently. If you get jammed by the enemy, your products will still be accessible because you literally have them right in front of you, where that computer may not operate anymore because your electricity got cut, or your radio may not transmit, or your internet may not connect to that cloud server that you need to get to your common operating picture digitally whenever the enemy takes that away from you. So you're not going to lose access to your information if you've got a version of analog cop. So analog is for everyone. We definitely think it's a necessity for all echelons to have a version, even if you're using a digital cop to work off of. Having an analog version of your fighting products is definitely a necessity. But that really brings up my last point when it comes to kind of the digital versus analog, is how do we bridge between digital and analog? Because
a great point.
I'll tell you what, like if I'm a battalion staff and I'm working off of something like Palantir MCS Cop,
and you're potentially hundreds of miles away.
Yep. But that ODA needs to mitigate their EMS signature. They need to, communicate less, try and hide in a denied environment. How do I get them that information? So we have, as a staff, we have to be prepared to bridge between digital and analog. And really, what we see, the best way to do this is to be able to allocate staff bandwidth towards creating small files that can be transmitted digitally over radios or other low probability intercept, low probability detect type of systems to a detachment in a more denied environment than you're in. And so, a couple of factors in this, obviously I already mentioned that detachment that's in denied territory probably can't access MCS Cop. And we've seen this play out in rotations where an ODA tried to get on their Starlink or whatever they had with them, tried to log in, based on batteries available and the connection speed that they had and the limited window that they could be on before the enemy was going to start finding them. They had to start running away or whatever the case. I shouldn't say running away, before they had to maneuver in the battle space. It wasn't enough for them to pull the information. So they never got the snapshot of what was going on. So what you have to do is, how do you get it down to a small product to send? Even like a picture can be large to send.
Yeah.
So what the staff really needs to be prepared to do is to take that fighting product and turn it into plain text, because as we probably all know, a plain text file, you might be able to send that very quickly over a radio even to that forward element, and they can receive that much more safely. And then they're going to translate those plain text, the grids with the description of what it is at that grid and what it is, they're going to turn that into their cop, their execution matrix. They're going to feed that thing into their own fighting products and do a little bit of staff work.
It still can have some format, so it's not just
absolutely
word, vomit on a page or
and,
on a
we've
file.
got standards that we use for this. We're not going to get into that for this conversation, but kind of the broad sweeping statement here is, as any echelon of staff, plan to be able to send plain text and be able to account for the time and manpower that is required for you to be able to create this and send that.
Yeah. So you're really focusing on company level, taking higher echelon information and passing it down to the downtrace units, whether that's CA, PSYOP, or Special Forces.
That's right.
But also, I assume you mean by bridging that analog and digital, that company level has to be able to then take the information from the downtrace units and message it to the higher unit.
That's right.
When that ODA CA team can't reach out to the SOTF directly.
That's exactly right. And it's got to be a two-way flow. And I think you're exactly right. The company level headquarters and really maybe even the battalion level headquarters are really the two echelons that are most likely to need to provide this sort of bridging service to make information flow effectively up and down in like low bandwidth methods.
All right.
Yeah, so that's
to finish this fighting products off. Like, what are best practices, and like, how do you coach these things?
So we've seen a lot of different ways, and I will say I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution where I would say, hey, this is always the best solution, do it this way. But I'm going to throw out some ideas because I think based on what you got available, you can take these ideas and create something that works for you. So some of the effective things that we've seen, the first one I'll say that is pretty commonly used, we see it often, is creating something that's like a battle board. And what I mean by a battle board, it could be a piece of plywood that you're taping or nailing some things to and hanging on the side of a vehicle or in a common area, or even using, like, if you go to Home Depot, you can get clear acrylic sheets. We see people make like personal battle boards, and you could have printed sheets of paper or your note paper that you kind of put in between two sheets of clear acrylic and just, be able to easily access it. We'll see, we see all the armored battalion commanders walking around with their battle boards that they probably have inside their tank, right?
Yes.
So that's what I mean by a battle board. And I'm gonna jump around a little bit here because NTC actually has a template of how they coach brigades to organize their their fighting products that I do want to take a second to go through because really what this does is creates a standard. You don't have to organize it this way, but this is relevant for special operations folks. You can trade apples for apples, so to speak, if you're trying to talk with a brigade. So the way they organize it, if you can imagine, in the center of your battle board, you've got a map that houses your common operating picture, common intel picture, over and all your overlays. On the left side, you've got all of your fighting products that relate to enemy focus. On the right side, you've got all your products that relate to a friendly focus. And then on the bottom are products that relate to timelines, like your execution matrix or Air Hope timeline or whatever else you've got, as well as discrete mission products like execution checklists and things like that for discrete missions. So that's a way to organize it. Keeps it easy to look at. You can quickly walk up and understand where to look for the appropriate product around the map. And, of course, the map with the common operating picture is the central item, with those overlays that you can look at it graphically.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep it organized so anybody that's in your unit that walks up, they understand like where something is and they can look at it and get updated on it. Do you see companies doing like 5-minute drills as they switch over between day shift, night shift, and stuff like that?
Yeah, that is something that we definitely coach. Or the other time to do a drill like that is going to be like if the commander's been out doing a meeting or out away from the headquarters for a while and walks back in. You want to be able to update him very quickly off the bat. And that, you mentioned like a 5-minute drill. Really what you're talking about is
whatever they want to call it.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Very quickly allowing each of the key staff members to go through any updates to their staff running estimate. Hey, here's what's changed in the time you've been gone, boss. Like that's what it comes down to. And yeah, the fighting products, you should absolutely be briefing that off of the fighting products. It should be displayed up there. So that's a great example of a good use for fighting products. So jumping down. So, okay, battle boards. I think that's an effective way. That's probably the most common way that we see our expeditionary special operations headquarters, with some kind of battle board. I'm going to throw out another cool idea that we saw one company headquarters do. They used they had some fold out tables that they were carrying around in the back of their truck. So they'd go stop at wherever their patrol base was going to be, break out these tables and put them out in between their vehicles. And on the tables, they actually had a series of document protectors taped down, and they were sliding the sheets of paper with their fighting products inside these. So essentially, it was all attached to the table, and you could walk around the table to the designated spot to see the fighting product you wanted to do. That was pretty effective for them. In their particular training rotation, we had extremely high winds going on. They came up with that actually as a way to prevent their stuff from flying away. Like, a battle board hung on the side of a truck was actually kind of a hazard. In fact, you got to take the weather into account, right? Like the winds were so strong that rotation. We actually had an incident where one of the spreader bars that holds the camo nets up collapsed down and hit a soldier in the head.
Oh,
you know,
geez.
it was pretty significant. So that was their creative solution on how to display their fighting products.
All right. Anything else on analog, or you want to switch over to digital?
I think probably the last thing I'll say on analog, you know, use what works for you. You know, I talked earlier about overlays. I think that's really important. Creating a way to have the overlays accessible on your common operating picture so you can just fold them and flip them on or off is pretty useful. So, you know, this is old school. We've been doing this in the military I've been in for 16 years. I remember seeing staffs doing this when I first got in. It's probably been going on way longer than that.
Yeah.
But literally just have it taped at the top of your map so you can fold that overlay back so you can just look at the raw map with just the friendly and enemy icons on there. And then, hey, I can flip my fires overlay. I can flip my log overlay. I can flip my medical overlay down if I want to look at those subsets of info. So that's the last thing I'll say on analog. But use your imagination, come up with a solution that works for you based on what your expeditionary footprint looks like, what type of vehicles you're using, what personnel you have. You know, there's not going to be a one size fits all, but hopefully those ideas help you to build something that is going to work for you.
All right. So how about digital?
So with digital, I think it's worth talking about what level of expeditionary posture you're in.
Okay.
Because on one side of the pendulum here, you might be in a hard stand command post with less enemy threat to you. You know, you're in a building, you got
And it has
power,
its own power grid. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. So if that's the case, and you know, this is in the global war on terror for the past few decades, this is really what you could expect to see in any type of headquarters.
Yeah.
Is a room, you've got some table and chairs arranged so that you've got all your staff members organized in a logical fashion. And up front, you've got your fighting products displayed on super cool TV screens or projectors displaying it up on a wall off of the computer. So this is a way that it's fast and effective. It's easy to update. You can immediately update it on the computers that are displaying the info and projecting it up. But of course, the downside to this is if you don't have consistent power, or you know there's issues with that, you're getting jammed, whatever the case may be, you're going to lose common access to your products immediately. And so we talked about the importance of analog. That's where that comes in there. But that's what you could use. So the second way that I'll say is that we talked about MCS COP or Palantir based systems where, or other systems where you've got a cloud that you're saving all your information and your fighting products are accessible by just logging in. So in this case, you might actually be accessing, looking at, or sharing your fighting products literally just on one computer or device to another.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of considerations here. First, which I think I'm double tapping this one, because if you have a computer screen or a cell phone screen, only one person is looking at that at a time.
Yep.
Almost certainly. And not all of the fighting products are probably displayed at the same time if you're not displaying them out openly.
Yes.
So this is a risk if you go with this. So that's why we highly encourage people to have something displayed commonly. So, but what I'll say is in a combination of digital and analog, this type of system might work well where you've got individual access to digital fighting products and common access to analog fighting products. Mm-hmm. This system might work really well for you. So you just have to take all those things into consideration. And as a staff, understand that at lower echelons, it's probably only key leaders who are going to be accessing the digital versions of things.
Yes.
So as long as you're considering that, that's a viable option or a part of your plan. And then a third method when we talk about digital fighting products, and this gets in a little bit to some of the technical innovation and development that our Army is going through right now and in special operations. Really, we look at the automatic ingestion of information from lower echelons into higher echelons, common operating picture and fighting products. And, to illustrate the example that I'm talking about here, so there's a thing, it's called the Modular Mission Environment, MME, and this leverages a cross-classification cloud-enabled environment where with MME, you might have a tactical level element that's operating off of something like a cell phone with ATAC, the Android Tactical Assault Kit. And through this MME environment, higher echelons of systems are automatically ingesting stuff like positional, like the positions of the lower elements, their reports, anything that they're loading into their ATAC. It's automatically ingesting that. And so then at the end of the day, the staff, the higher echelon staff that's looking at MCS COP, for example, is now automatically seeing that information in their common operating picture and fighting products. And they can then analyze it from there.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of risk to force on that if you're forward of the friendly line of troops and you have something running ATAC and it's either hanging off cell towers or off of a Wi-Fi signal or something. Like maybe, hey, you're not worried about it because it's encrypted, so they might detect me, but they won't know what I'm talking about. Or maybe, hey, I'm trying to just blend in and look like somebody else. But does that fit the environment? It might fit the environment more if you're training at Joint Readiness Training Center than at the National Training Center. But it does go back to your comment about digital products, especially on a phone. One person's going to see it. Yes, teams like to come out and use ATAC and then send out via Bluetooth or whatever. Hey, here's the data package. Okay, everybody open your ATAC and you can brief off of it. It's not quite as effective as just a map or a sand table. Just spend a few minutes and draw your graphics on a map or use a sand table to depict what you're going to do. People will visualize it much better than trying to talk points on an ATAC. Yeah,
you nailed it on the head. And what I will say, this is a whole separate conversation that we could talk about at a future date, when we talk about managing your electromagnetic signature. And there's good ways to use things like this. You don't always have to set up your system. If it's going to automatically ingest, you don't have to set it up where it's doing that 24/7 every single moment. So when we talk about creating communications windows or only non-persistently connecting to whatever uplink you have to send data, those are sorts of force protection measures that, our special operations folks are going to use to be able to have these cool tools, but then also, survive in that denied environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I let you wrap up this conversation, sir, I'll just mention one more thing about ATAC is typically people look at it with satellite imagery, and that's great. It shows you a lot of things that aren't on the map, but it also makes terrain harder to understand than just breaking out that 1/50,000 map sheet and going, I might not actually be able to maneuver through that corridor that I think, that trail looks pretty easy. And then you drive it and all of a sudden there's a 10-foot wall in front of you that you're not going through. And then lastly, going back to when I was an infantry platoon leader and Colonel Hardman, the former JRTC COG, was my battalion commander. We went to JRTC and he really harped on everybody bringing small like battle boards that we jumped in. And he was trying to get us to be creative with ways to have analog products. And I think somebody suggested shower curtains. So like I went out and I found a shower curtain liner that was like a big foldable whiteboard. And I was able to use map markers. So we'd get to our patrol base. I'd throw it out. I'd get the squad leaders to, sector fire, draw a sector sketch, write priorities of work, stuff like that. And then I could just fold it back up and move on to the next place. So I think something like that could be applicable for the detachment level. It is nice because it folds down, but you can bring whatever you like. And as long as it's big enough for everybody to see, it's definitely useful.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear. I love to hear the creative ways that people display this stuff because you really can use your imagination. And I think that's one of the, for me, just working in the special operations community, one of the things that I love to see the most is how really everyone in the community is just an avid problem solver. And you just illustrated a great example that, you did back when you were in the infantry. But that's the kind of thing that we love to see out here at NTC. And really, I've said it now, I think 3 or 4 times, there's not going to be a one size fits all solution to fighting products, but that's what you have to apply some creativity to come up with something that really works for you. So, all right. But yeah, that's kind of the takeaway. If you have listened to this, you made it to this point, is really that at the detachment and company levels in particular, those headquarters, should start with those minimum recommended fighting products and build from there as you need to make sure you've got the effective tools to build that common understanding, visualization, and synchronization in support of your commanders, the staffs at echelon, and subordinate elements. And just to review, because I think if you don't take anything else away, the 6 fighting products that you should really be looking at, your common operating picture, common intel picture. Number 2 is the execution matrix. Number 3, information collection matrix. Number 4, high payoff target list. Number 5 is your target sync matrix or fire support execution matrix. Number 6 is your log stat. And every SOF headquarters, as we said, needs to look at their internal staff horsepower. Who do you have? The type of information you need to communicate, your available equipment that you've got on hand, and what the enemy threat is as you decide how to build and use these fighting products. So, definitely wish you the best and let those creative juices flow to come up with a great solution for you. And if you're coming out to NTC, we look forward to seeing you out here and training with you and hopefully coaching you some more so that you can continue your journey.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate all that you've done to help us become a more ready and lethal force.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where ARSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform.
Actions will determine the outcome.